How about now? Better? Okay. Thank you again. Welcome. I'd like to firstly say a big thank you to the NBI. Thank you for hosting this pavilion. Thank you for giving us a bit of a home away from home, even if it is a small taste of home. And also for the opportunity to facilitate this event today. And really that brings us to the question of why are we here? We are here because the world is facing an existential crisis like we have never seen before. It's widely recognized that it's the rate of change, global warming of our planet, is due to human interventions. So it really is up to us to take action, do the things that are needed to mitigate climate change. And that's what we're trying to do here today with the Inclusive Carbon Standard. We are trying to remove barriers to implementing the types of actions and initiatives that will help in reducing global climate change. This is the agenda for the discussion today. We'll be providing a brief introduction, principles of the environmental integrity associated with our carbon program, the unique technology platform, and various technological elements, a short discussion on markets and next steps, and I'd first like to introduce a couple of other participants who will be contributing to this presentation. First will be Chris, our partner from Food and Trees, who is also responsible for the founding of this carbon program. We will provide a couple of interactive sessions with my colleague Serena, who will take you through some of the technological aspects of the platform, so you can direct any questions and queries to her. And really, I'd like this to be a very interactive session. If you have questions, please don't wait until the end. Please raise your hand and we can take them as it goes along. So with that, I think I'll hand over to Chris. So are you there?
I am. Hi, Olivia.
Hi.
Thanks. I can't see the slides, but I'm just going to hop straight into it. I'm assuming we're looking at what is the ICS. Next slide. Perfect. So the Inclusive Carbon Standard is a new global carbon credit program. Essentially, it is an African carbon credit program. And the idea was that we wanted to look at scaling emission reduction, and looking specifically at carbon removal projects and making it accessible, essentially to people within South Africa and Africa, but also to the world. And the idea, obviously, with any kind of carbon standard is that you want to ensure integrity and social safeguarding. And so we've created a robust framework that incorporates or encompasses all of this. And ultimately, what we want is we want people to take climate action, promote climate action, and be rewarded for good climate action. Next slide, please. So the Inclusive Carbon Standard has had a very interesting journey so far. It actually started in 2017, and it started with the idea, essentially, that we believed, all of us here believed, that we could do something better in the space. And essentially in 2017, we built a proof of concept. And initially, it was we were looking primarily at afforestation, food and trees for Africa. And the team quickly realized that the application for this was beyond just trees, and so renewables and other types of projects basically came onto the system. We had a very interesting thing happen in 2019, where the National Treasury of South Africa and the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy, shortened to the DMRE, decided that they wanted to put a carbon standard framework out there, and we were in a position where, because we'd been working on this, we were able to contribute quite significantly to that and provide a framework for them to actually test against. And that was a really interesting experience, and I think that we've added quite a lot of value to the national national framework as well. And then we continue to build on this. And obviously with these kind of things, you can't just do it alone. So we needed some stakeholder engagement, and we ran stakeholder engagement workshops, and we got a lot of feedback with what we were doing, a lot of positive feedback. And in 2021, that's when the primary side of the platform development, which will be talked about just now, came in. And that kind of continued a little bit. And once we got a little bit of working with the platform, we then looked at we then had a few more stakeholder engagements in 2022, because again, you need to make sure that people are on board with this. And again, we've received overwhelming positive feedback in this regard. And then we published the first draft, well, it was actually the first published version of the standard last year. The platform went into beta testing, and we started we'd started the governance program, but the governance structures that we essentially formulated were established, namely the Environmental Integrity Committee and the Technical Subcommittee. And then this year, excitingly, we launched. We launched in Johannesburg in July this year, and the standard has essentially become operational. And so we're in the process of developing the ecosystem of component methodologies and getting auditors and auditor training and getting projects onto the system. But essentially, we've operationalized, and that's where we are at the moment. Next slide, please. So just to talk a little bit about the scope of the ICS. Essentially, we refer to the ICS as an ecosystem, and the ecosystem brings together the project owners, methodology owners, auditors, and of course, observers and public into this framework and into this ecosystem that essentially allows you to start developing good projects towards carbon offset. And we basically started to, one of the principles of this is that we wanted to make sure, or one of the reasons that we wanted to make sure that we could do this on a more cost-effective way. I don't want to talk about some of the slides that are coming up later, but essentially there is a very unique structure and a very good technology stack that the ICS essentially sits on. And again, the point of this is that we felt a lot of the current standards in the world were kind of exclusionary in the sense that you had to have quite a lot of capital, you had to look at large-scale projects. And I think one of the things that the ICS does is that we looked at bringing in smaller projects so we can go all the way from picker-scale projects all the way through to mega projects, because we don't discriminate there. And essentially what bridges the gap in cost and bringing that cost down is the technology stack and the platform that everything's built on. So we haven't excluded any projects types from the ICS, and I think that's quite interesting. Rather, we base things on principles. So obviously you've got to have restrictions based on additionality, but also the main principle is do no significant harm, rather than saying we're excluding solar PV or something along those lines. And then essentially, because of the integrity of the credits and the transparency of the system, we're looking at providing credits into regulated and voluntary markets. So one of the other elements we utilize in this is called component methodologies. And one of the component methodologies that is allowed for in the system is called tagging. And so there is the ability to tag credits in different ways, potentially for different markets or for different things. Next slide, please. So this is the basic structure of the ICS. We felt that from the very beginning, you had to inculcate transparency and accountability into the system. So we have an incredibly robust system or structure where you have a board of trustees, but separated from the board of trustees on the other side is the Environmental Integrity Committee, who's given a lot of authority to make decisions relating to the methodologies and the projects that come onto the system. And obviously there's a standard secretariat that has to do a lot of admin. Beneath the Environmental Integrity Committee is a technical subcommittee. So we're making sure that all of those kind of gaps are plugged. We've got excellent governance on the one side, and excellent kind of social and ethics and environmental integrity on the other side, and obviously we've got technical experts. And all of this rests essentially on the ICS platform, and the platform, which will be spoken about just now, brings together in an ecosystem methodology developers, project owners, and accredited auditors. And this is essentially the basic structure of the ICS. Next slide, please. Just to talk about where we're going. So, there's always, when it comes to these things, there's always a chicken and egg situation. You've got to make sure that things work, essentially, before you can launch. And then, obviously, you need certain accreditations after you launch, because you're not going to get those accreditations until you're running. So we're now running. And the point is that in the next few years, essentially what needs to happen is we are looking at getting certain accreditations around the world, which will be spoken about just now as well. But this year is the year that we essentially launch what we call the AGM, so the founding AGM. Everything is already running, but this is the year where we now basically put everything onto the system in a certain way, and we actually look to start running projects and issuing carbon credits in a certain way. And then obviously building towards 2028, or just to maybe speak about the structure of how this works. I think one of the things that is quite interesting about this is we made a specific point that we believe this entire space should be transparent. And we believe that the transparency kind of breeds accountability. And I think accountability within the carbon credit space is probably going to be and transparency, that two of the most important factors that essentially allow the space to work properly and appropriately. So what we are looking at doing is making sure that all these meetings that are in all the various committees are going to be open and viewed. There's nothing to hide in what we're doing. And I think that's quite an interesting feature of this, is that we believe that, the team has worked incredibly hard on this. It is a really good team. We're doing some good work. You'll see the members of the Environmental Integrity Committee and technical subcommittees just now. And we believe that this should all be open. And so you'll see coming up, we obviously are going to have various AGMs and various meetings, and the voting rights and all of these kind of things are there, but it's been very well thought out. And essentially what we are trying to breed from the very beginning or trying to inculcate is a culture of transparency and accountability within the carbon space. And I think that's one of the interesting features of governance within the ICS as well. Next slide. And I think, thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Cool. Thanks.
Thanks very much. I'll go into a couple of the principles behind how we intend to ensure that there is environmental integrity associated with this carbon program. You may be aware of the news that has been around recently, longer than I would have liked. In fact, calling into question the integrity of some of the carbon programs that are established out there, those that are new and that are old. And it's of concern. The assets that come out of this process need to be real, they need to be measurable, they need to have been created in the way that they were required to, according to methodologies, other types of governance principles as well. Chris alluded to our Environmental Integrity Committee. This is a group of experts. Many of them are South African. We're in South Africa, but a number of them are international as well. And they bring together collectively an enormous amount of experience and expertise with regards to carbon markets and also carbon project development, which is very key. Their role is to make sure that the carbon credits that come out of the program are robust. As I mentioned, they must be real, they must be accurate, and they must also have the various safeguards that Chris was alluding to as well. The Environmental Integrity Committee is supported by a technical subcommittee, and this is also another team of experts. Members will come and go, but these are really the members intended to provide expert technical advice where perhaps the Environmental Integrity Committee does not have that specialized set of knowledge, experience, and capabilities. And our technical subcommittee will then be able to assist them wherever it is that they are needed. Chris also alluded to the process that we are following, which is to get accreditation with a number of bodies and entities that we believe can also give weight to the carbon program. It's not enough for us to say that we think that this is a great program, but we do need to go through the process to have that kind of independently validated. We have been developing the program according to the principles of these various organizations. They include ICROA, CORSIA, and the ICVCM, in particular the core carbon principles that have recently come out of the ICVCM. The principles are fairly well established, and we've borrowed a lot and learnt a lot from legacy carbon programs. Additionality is non-negotiable. Additionality is the principle that in order to qualify as a carbon credit project, you need to demonstrate that your project actually does deserve the carbon finances. If that's not the case, your project should be financed through another mechanism, through commercial banks, through the normal courses of action. What we want to do here is unlock finances for projects that really do deserve to happen, but that face barriers. And these are often financial, and that's why additionality is such an important component. Baselines. This is a big deal. If you don't set a credible, realistic, robust baseline, then the carbon credits that you generate through your project can be called into question. Obviously, there's a requirement for quantified, monitored, and verified data. Independent auditing is a key criteria and also not negotiable. And that's a key focus point that we will be working on in the way forward. Any emissions removals projects needs to demonstrate that they are permanent, that there's a low risk, that the sequestered emissions will somehow be released into the atmosphere. No double counting. Again, these are very standard kind of principles. Governance. Chris was talking about our Environmental Integrity Committee. We'll also have a board of trustees. And they will be separate entities to ensure that there is a very strong, robust governance structure. Having a good registry is incredibly important because it provides for clear chain of custody. It also assists with preventing double counting. So that will be a key feature coming up that we're working on. And obviously the principles of do no significant harm or do no net harm. Projects need to comply with all the laws in country, and that includes environmental and social and other laws. And these principles are over and above that. And obviously land-based projects, forestry types of projects, they'll need to comply with the Cancun safeguards. Also intend to have a high degree of transparency. We already have a published carbon standard, which is available online for comment. We have operating manuals, terms of reference of our various committees and boards. The minutes of meetings will be published. The component methodologies, which my colleague Serena will come to a little bit later. These are some of the cornerstones of the inclusive carbon standard, and she'll talk a bit more to that later, and why they represent a bit of a novel and unique aspect in terms of this carbon program compared to legacy carbon programs. Projects that are registered will be made public. Their various documentation regarding their project reports, monitoring reports as well, and obviously any issued credits. These will all be transparently available on the platform, which is the hub of where things get done, really. Just a slide here on the do no significant harm principle. That's increasingly a huge focus of these types of projects, where in the media recently there have been negative reports of project developers that have not really complied with these types of principles, where perhaps there have been communities that have not been consulted with, their rights have been abused. And we intend to mitigate those types of risks with requiring our project developers to undertake a do no significant harm assessment. And these are the couple of points that would be required in the assessment. So from here, I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Serena. Serena, I hope you're there.
Yes, good morning, Olivia, and good morning also to everybody in the room and everybody online. If I could request the slides to be projected on screen again, please. So I will be talking a bit about the technology platform and the new elements that really sets the inclusive standard apart. The next slide, please, Olivia. So just broadly, as we will delve into each of these in the subsequent slides, but some of the really new and novel features of the ICS includes simplified methodologies that is built on an open source technology stack, automated document generation from PDDs to monitoring reports. There's also data collection through the connection of IoT devices and measuring and monitoring devices directly into the platform, which of course enables automated emission reduction calculations. And we will talk a little bit about landmark values and landmark projects and how together all of these elements significantly reduce the time and complexity of the auditing burden. Next slide, please, Olivia. So what are component methodologies? These are basically modular pieces of project details, additionality, baseline, monitoring and emission reduction, permanence, and tagging components that get put together to form one complete methodology for different projects. All projects will at least have one project details, additionality, baseline, and monitoring component methodology applicable and most suited to the project. And of course, carbon removal projects will also need to include a permanence component methodology and the different tagging component methodologies, whether a project wishes to tag a certain project for a certain market, or whether they want to showcase the certain co-benefits that the project entail, or the use of proceeds. These are voluntary tagging component methodologies that can be added to this complete suite that formulates the complete project. Next, please. So if we compare the inclusive carbon standard to the traditional programs out there, traditionally the methodologies of traditional programs are very large and their scope is very, very big. And all of these methodologies already contain a project description, additionality, baseline, and monitoring, but the scope caters for many scenarios. And this makes it quite cumbersome, complicated, and quite a lengthy process to complete these methodologies. So the ICS aims to break this down into these component methodologies where projects can basically use tailored components, put them together, and then the overall methodology at the end becomes a much more targeted methodology, and the need to write many long pages, often proving why something is not applicable, is then avoided, significantly reducing the time and complexity spent on getting these documents through the pipeline. Next, please. Again, on the traditional program side, we have the manual creation of project design documents and monitoring reports. Calculations are based on human interpretation of the methodologies, and sometimes these methodologies are open to interpretation, a little bit vague, and a lot of time and cost is spent with companies through employing external consultants to try and interpret these. Calculations are also done mostly in massive spreadsheets that also puts a big burden on the auditors to look for human errors of methodology interpretation, data capture, and then the calculations in these big spreadsheets. What the Inclusive Carbon Standard does is it employs a technology platform where documents are generated automatically from templates created by the component methodologies through smart contracts. So project reports are automatically generated through the fields that have been completed online. And when we look at monitoring reports, these are also automatically generated through data that have either been entered manually or came into the system through IoT connected devices. So you can imagine the audit requirement being significantly reduced due to the fact that there's secure data coming into the platform and this automatic generation of the various reports. And this is hopefully going to lead to greater inclusivity and climate action. Next, please. Another very unique feature of the ICS is the concept of landmark projects and landmark values. And this is based on the principle of legal precedence, where once a landmark project or value has been verified and gone through the auditing route through the ICS, it can be used and applied by a subsequent project that is of a similar nature or has similar requirements. So an example of this is a specific technology's penetration rate in a certain country, or for example, the grid emission factor of a certain regional or national grid that is used in formulating either baseline or monitoring calculations. So the auditing of a project that uses a landmark value is significantly reduced because of the fact that that cost and time has already been spent validating and verifying these landmark projects and values. So subsequent projects have a benefit from this process that has preceded it. And again, this is trying to increase the inclusivity of projects and increase climate mitigation. Typically, the monitoring component methodologies will stipulate a validity period for landmark values, and this will also ensure that any landmark value that is used always remain current and up to date. Next, please. So as Chris and Olivia alluded to, the ICS is built on a very comprehensive open source technology stack that is hosted in a cloud server. A MySQL database hosts all the company information, all the component methodologies, project reports, data, and this all links to a very powerful mathematical programming language or AMPL solver that automates and draws the information from the database into the solver and automatically calculates the emission reductions. The registry is run by an independent registry provider. And of course, we have a user interface so that our users aren't bombarded with technical intricacies, but that they have a seamless experience through the platform. And on the other hand, we also have our APIs and IoT interfaces with connected devices such as electricity meters or inline gas analyzers and those type of measurements. Next, please. So just to give you an overview, a project developer coming into the platform would start by selecting a suite of different component methodologies that are compatible. Once they've done this, the platform will automatically generate their project report form. This is the template that they will complete with their project information. And this all happens online in a user's profile. And then the project report is automatically generated and can be submitted for validation. The auditing requirements on this project report is that the auditor will ensure that the component methodologies that have been used are compatible with each other and that they are all applicable to the relevant project. And of course, they will validate the information contained in the project form. Once a combination of different component methodologies used by a project has completely gone through the auditing process, this unique combination of component methodologies becomes a landmark project. So again, a subsequent project that wants to use the exact same combination of component methodologies and whose project is of the same nature will benefit from a reduced auditing burden because of the fact that at least this part of the process has already gone through rigorous auditing. Next, please, Olivia. Similarly, when it comes to the generation of a monitoring report, once the project and while the project is operational, monitored data will continually come into the ICS platform. The monitoring report is also auto-generated online, governed by the monitoring component methodology and its setup. And again, manual data will be entered as relevant, and also the IoT devices connected to the ICS securely will come in to the monitoring report. The emissions reduction calculations will automatically be performed by the AMPL solver, and the platform will automatically generate the monitoring report. So this is where the beauty and the efficiency of the ICS really shines, because the auditing requirement will follow the normal process on manual data. But when it comes to data that is coming into the platform via IoT devices, the burden is significantly reduced, because what an auditor essentially has to ensure is that the calibration certificates for the measuring devices and IoT devices are up to date, and that the connections are secure. And then they can also perform various spot checks. So the ICS platform provides for all of these checks to also be performed efficiently by the auditors. Next, please. So once a user, including a methodology developer, project developer, or an auditor has registered on the ICS at app.inclusivecarbon.org, this is typically the dashboard that they would be welcomed with. This is a screenshot of my platform or my dashboard. And as you can see on the left-hand side, you have everything in one place, including the governance documents that will include the actual ICS standard document, all the manuals, including methodology development, and also auditing manuals, all the guiding documents that can assist you through the platform. The methodology directory of approved component methodologies in the public domain will be there, as well as the methodologies that you are working with. And here again, the platform provides either the option to create these methodologies in the public domain or privately, depending on whether the user wants to invite collaboration and input. Excuse me. And then on the right-hand side, you can see there's a little star there. The ICS also provides a bit of project management features. If any measuring devices are due for calibration, that is also flagged on the platform, and everything is really hosted in one central space. Next, please. If a component methodology is not available to a project developer, again, the platform is very intuitive, written in normal English, trying to really remove the barrier, and project developers can propose new component methodologies should what they are looking for not be available. Next, please. So when it comes to the calculations and landmark values, this is again where the ICS is really powerful. On the left-hand side, you can see during component methodology setup, just the creation of a parameter. In this case, this is a grid emission factor. And at the bottom, you can see the flexibility of data coming in either through IoT or having the ability to set this as a landmark value. And on the right-hand side is just an example of what a set of equations, in this case in a baseline component methodology, would look like once it's set up. And then this creates a very fixed structure for the platform to automatically generate the emission reduction or removal calculations, removing this element of human interpretation and error. Next, please. So just another example on the screen, once a project developer has selected their suite of available component methodologies, as you can see on the left, on the right-hand side, it'll create an online project form automatically, and the project developer will then go and complete both the qualitative and quantitative inputs that this online form prescribes. And once all those unanswered fields have changed to answer, the project report is automatically generated and can be submitted for validation. Next, please. When it comes to auditing and project verification audits, this is a typical view that a project developer will see. And the benefit here is that a project developer will have one version of the truth and one place where they will always be able to see the status of their verification audit, all the project documentation history, all the data calculation logs, the audits and the various phases that the project has gone through, as well as the credits that have been issued to date. Next, please. From an auditor's perspective, the ICS creates a mirrored framework that follows the component methodologies and project forms and allows the auditor to mark all the different fields contained in the project or monitoring form as either approved or rejected, which assists, of course, with tracking the work that the auditor does through the system. But on the right-hand side, the auditor also has the ability to leave very detailed comments pertaining to specific fields in the various reports, along with the decisions and future actions that are required. And this really creates a very efficient feedback mechanism from the auditors to the project developers pertaining to actions required for approval. Next, please. I won't go into a lot of detail, but the data handling of the ICS is really very comprehensive and powerful. And as an auditor, you will have the ability to completely and transparently see all calculations, all data, history of different calculation iterations and changes to data. And this is also available in different formats, tabular format for spot checking, graphical format, and it can also be downloaded to an Excel format should this be a preference or a requirement. Next, please. Lastly, when an auditor has completed their verification or validation audit, the ICS will automatically generate the auditor's report, capturing all the comments that I've just shown you in the slides before in one auditor's validation or verification report. And this again will be available online or as a downloadable PDF. Thank you very much. Hand back to you, Olivia.
Thanks very much, Serena. Just to summarize what Serena was saying is that what our intention and aim is to do is to expedite the tasks that are needed to register a carbon project. So that means helping project developers get their information onto a portal as quickly and as easily as possible, and to make it as quick and as easy as possible for auditors to then audit these projects, whether it's a validation, a registration, or a verification of carbon credits. At the same time, we do not intend to lose any items that can increase integrity or ensure integrity. That's really the key message coming out of the technology stack that we intend to apply here. For markets, I'll go very briefly. The carbon program was intended initially to service the South African carbon market, and it still is. For those of you who don't know, we have a domestic carbon tax that has a carbon offset component in it. Taxpayers in the carbon tax can offset a proportion, 5 to 10% currently, of their taxable emissions with carbon offsets, and this is creating a thriving market. The regulations currently allow for a number of recognized carbon programs, including the VCS Gold Standard, CDM, and any other carbon program that a minister may approve. And that's what we're aiming for, is to get ministerial approval for this carbon program. As soon as our South African government allows us to apply, we will do so. This slide just shows some of those recognized carbon programs as well. Obviously, there's a much broader market at play. There's the voluntary carbon markets. In Africa, we had an exciting development at the previous COP with the launch of ACME, the African Carbon Markets Initiative, and there's the broader voluntary carbon market. And in addition, there's obviously the Paris markets that are coming up, which is the 6.2 markets. And we intend to provide carbon offsets that can participate in all of these markets. So, for next steps, as I mentioned, we are in the process of getting independent accreditation and approvals for our carbon program, and we'll be looking to the ICVCM, in particular the core carbon principles, the CORSIA accreditation, as well as our domestic South African carbon tax approval. What we're also trying to do is develop a community. We are trying to bring together project developers, people who are interested in developing methodologies, to participate with us in developing the methodologies that are needed on this carbon program. And these will be open source methodologies, and we encourage anybody who has an interest in this regard to get in touch with us. So that's the summary. Yep, we're looking for projects. We're looking for methodology developers who are interested in taking this journey with us, and we are looking for any comments on our currently published Inclusive Carbon Standard and the various operational documents that are available online. We really would like to have a robust dialogue about any elements there that you think can be improved, or if there are items that are missing, please do get in touch with us. And that's it in the interests of time, but I would like to pause here before we go for a couple of questions and answers. And just to let you know that I think we have a team online, which will be Serena and Robbie, if there are any terribly difficult questions that I can't handle. But first, can I open it up to the room, the participants here, and then we can open up to if there are any online questions. Okay, I don't see hands in the room, but Simone is also on our team. Are there perhaps questions from participants online?
Hi, Olivia. Yes, just one in the chat from Lisa. A key differentiator of the ICS is lower cost of auditing and verification. What steps are still needed to be able to determine what the costs will be?
Thanks, Simone. I think I can jump in there, and Robbie and Serena, please do contribute. But it is a bit of a chicken and egg scenario. Our intention is to dramatically reduce the auditing costs associated with work in these carbon projects. However, there is likely to be learning by doing. So initially, we anticipate that for the first movers, the costs may not be that dramatically reduced, but certainly as we get more auditors online, as we get more methodologies and more projects through the system, our aim is to reduce the cost of registering a carbon project by tenfold. That is really what we're aiming for, and our intention is to use the technology stack to use the number of principles in terms of reducing the amount of work that auditors need to do. For instance, our system will write their reports for them. That will no longer be a wholly manual process. We do envisage that those types of elements, including the ability to have smart meters connected to the system where you have data that is drawn from the internet, we expect that those are the types of levers that will reduce the costs. But it's hard to give a rand or a dollar value just now.
I don't see any other questions other than will the slides and recordings be available afterwards, and it will be up on our website. I'll put the link in the chat below.
Simone, I think there is a question from Michelle. Are your credits fungible or transferable?
Oh, sorry, it came through.
Great. Well, now that I've got you online, Serena, do you or Robbie want to take that?
I think I'm going to pass this one to Robbie.
Okay. Yeah. The word fungible can have many meanings. It is fungible in the sense that it's unitized to a ton of CO2. If you take the word fungible as meaning can you transfer it from one market to the other, then at the moment not yet. There was a slide that Olivia showed where we said what approvals we have started and will continue the process to seek. The first is the South African government. We've been working, we actually approached the South African government before we even started building this to ask whether or not the government will be in a position to consider approval of the standard. Obviously, we can't say, will you approve the standard, because they haven't seen it. And there is a program going on in the South African government to approve a framework for the approval of domestic standards. So the moment that framework is approved by the Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy, we will submit it, and in that case, the ICS credits will then be fungible with the South African carbon tax system. The South African carbon tax system currently allows for, it says CDM, but we believe that that will be updated to Article 6.4 credits, VCS and gold standard credits. Then there is the matter of the voluntary carbon market, and there, as we've indicated, we will be submitting applications to the ICVCM and CORSIA. And then the other door that may open is in terms of Article 6.2, that would be dependent on bilateral agreements between governments. We know that there are a couple of Article 6.2 frameworks of some countries that is taking a fairly liberal view on what to include and what not. We do believe that the ICS, the environmental integrity of the ICS, is higher than what is currently required by some of the Article 6.2 frameworks. So we do think that the ICS will be a very applicable standard and a very practical standard, especially for use for projects in the poorer countries. I hope that answers the question.
Rabi, just Michelle's asking clarity on transferable. So it says once an offset is used, if it is transferable, it means that it can be transferred to others multiple times. Maybe just clarity on that.
Yeah. So there's a couple of dimensions to transferable as well. The first is are the credits saleable? In other words, if person A owns it, can it be transferred to person B? The answer is yes, definitely. We don't house the registry in the ICS itself, but the registry that we are outsourcing to does have the facility to transfer from one owner to the other. That is within one jurisdiction. Transfer can have another meaning, and that is, can you transfer it from one jurisdiction to another? In the voluntary carbon market, yes, very definitely, because the voluntary carbon market is not constrained by the requirements of the Paris Agreement. in terms of the Paris Agreement, it will be transferable if it is recognized in the bilateral agreement between different host parties in terms of Article 6.2. Yeah, we've just had a comment here in the room that there may be a concern with double counting. The double counting, just maybe some background on that. In our view, there are three areas of integrity that needs to be guaranteed in the carbon market, and some credits, some carbon programs wrap them into one, and we think that is a wrong approach. The areas of integrity are, first of all, environmental integrity. In the ICS case, this is what the ICS is guaranteeing. That means that if you've got a certificate that says 1 ton of CO2 has been reduced, then it has definitely been reduced. The second area of integrity is the area of social integrity. And in all of the countries that we've operated, there are laws and regulations applicable with respect to social integrity. In South Africa specifically, we've got environmental laws, we've got laws relating to the social and environmental impact of credits, and we think that carbon credits should operate within the laws of the country. So we do not provide for the ICS to guarantee the social integrity. We provide platforms for it to report on it and to provide transparency, but there's no guarantee on it. And the last, and this is where the double counting comes in, is the issue of economic integrity. That relates to, if I own it, do I really own it? Can it only be sold once? Can it be transferred to more? And that goes directly to the integrity and of the registry. And we are confident that the platform, that the registry that we've outsourced is built on, as well as the operation of the registry on that platform, does provide that economic integrity. In other words, that in the case that the credits are transferred, they will not be double counted, they will not be double issued. That economic integrity is guaranteed by the platform of the registry.
Thanks, Robbie. I understand there is also another question coming from an online attendee, and I guess it's more of a statement to say that so far carbon trading and offsetting is a monumental failure, with oil producers buying carbon credits but doing absolutely nothing about reducing oil and gas exploration or production. And it is a very valid statement. And I think we can start by saying that carbon credits do not represent some sort of silver bullet. They're not going to cure climate change. What we need is an enormous suite of measures. And ideally, responsible corporates will only use carbon offsets to reduce those emissions in their value chains and in their direct operations, which they cannot abate, which they cannot reduce or avoid through other technology measures. And carbon credits therefore play an incredibly important role in this ecosystem of how it is that we're going to reduce global warming. It's not the be-all and an end-all, but it is a valid measure. And that's also why it's incredibly important that the carbon credits that are used in this system must have high degrees of integrity. They must really, really be real and accurate. Simone, I'm not sure if there are any more questions.
I see Michelle does have a follow-up. So how does it work? A credit is meant to offset a bad emission, so until the bad emission is neutralized, the carbon credit is meaningless.
Robbie, I'm not sure.
Yeah,
Paulo, do you want to?
Yeah, the main thing, and it relates to the previous comment as well. I've actually addressed the previous comment in the online Q&A. is there is a lot of pushback, and has been since the introduction of the CDM in the Kyoto Protocol in the late 1990s. There has been a lot of pushback against carbon. Some people are saying carbon credit gives you a right to pollute, a license to pollute. Other people are saying you shouldn't privatize the atmosphere. And the one thing I find missing in all of those discussions is people come from different ideological backgrounds, and they never sort out. And unless you can agree on the ideological background or foundation, you can have these arguments for decades, like we have been having. The fundamental principle of a carbon credit is bound in the free market economy. And people who don't accept that, it doesn't even make sense to engage in discussions, because then you need to figure out what the nature of the economy is before you can start talking about carbon credits. The second thing is that when you look at the global atmosphere, it doesn't matter whether a ton of CO2 was emitted in Siberia or in South Africa. That ton of CO2 contributes to the global atmosphere. The next thing you've got to consider is that because energy is so ubiquitous in the global economy, and energy is the largest contributor to greenhouse gas emissions, the whole concept of polluter pays principle is very weak, because the cost of energy is passed through to society as a whole. So if you bring all of that together, and if you realize that a carbon credit gives the emitter of the greenhouse gases access to least cost mitigation options, and by having an efficient carbon credit system operating in the world, we can actually reduce the overall cost burden that's placed on the energy sector and society as a whole. And that will be to the benefit of society as a whole. And if you bring all of that together, and again, it's based on the ideological basis that the world does operate in a free market economy, then carbon credits play an incredibly important role in the decarbonization effort. The comment was made earlier that despite carbon credits, the amount of oil and gas that's burnt in the world has not reduced. And yes, that's true, because at the moment the global carbon price is not high enough to price fossil fuels out of the global economy. But if the carbon price was high enough in the world, it would price the use of fossil fuels out of the global economy. This is something that we can spend a week talking about, so I think I'll stop it.
Okay, there's no more questions in the chat.
Thanks.
There is one question that says, is this why COP28 is being held at the biggest? I would take it further. I stopped attending COPs in 2014. The question is, why do you hold a COP? We're dialing in from Johannesburg at the moment. I suspect that the management of the UNFCCC is trying to influence the large emitters, the large oil producers, to take climate change seriously, and maybe that's why it's held in the Middle East. One of the last COPs I attended was actually in Doha, in Qatar, and there it was very clearly stated that the idea is to influence the people. Another COP that I did attend almost a decade ago was in Poland, and the reason why it was held in Poland at the time was because Poland was the largest emitter in the European Union. But unfortunately, I can't speak for the organizer of the COP.
Okay. Thanks, Robbie, and thank you, Serena and Simone, and for Chris as well for dialing in and patience in the start. I know we have run over time a bit. I think we can probably close the session. So, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Please reach out to us if you have any questions. We'd love to hear from you.